All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. The crowded race in California to replace Gavin Newsom as governor has, well, lacked sizzle so far. And last night, the debate in San Francisco did have a few key moments, but it was still largely focused on the issues as those 7 candidates, 6 Democrats and 1 Republican taking the stage. And this a post from KTVU, our Fox 2 station there in the Bay Area, saying voters got their first close look at the candidates hoping to succeed Governor Newsom as they debated issues from housing costs to public safety. Here's just a quick snippet of some of what we heard last night.
Address the elephant in the room, or perhaps, as some might say, the rhino.
We have the opportunity to add more police in our communities, to keep our communities safe.
You must have been talking to a different mayor.
The governor of California needs to stand up for the values of Californians, immigrants and non-immigrants.
I think I need to address.
All right, we're going to be joined right now here by the host and moderator of that event, Fox 2 KTVU's Greg Lee. Greg, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And obviously, there were a few candidates that weren't on the stage, but from your vantage point, up close and personal with some of these candidates that hope to be the next governor of the Golden State, what were your big takeaways?
Proved again for us that this is a crowded field, and as you said in your intro, we have known this is a race that has not captured a lot of people's attention. There was a lot of focus on Prop 50 last year, and sort of these candidates as they jumped into this race kind of fell to the wayside. But we were grateful that last night really was the first chance that voters were paying attention and able to take a really close look at these candidates. Look, the challenge for any of them at this point is, particularly the Democrats with so many in this race, is trying to shade themselves different as it pertains to policy. Where do they stand on housing? Where do they stand on homelessness? And why is that different from the other candidates in the race? How do they stand out? And why is that different than what Governor Newsom is doing right now? I mean, a lot of the candidates I've spoken to have talked about taking the state in a new direction. Well, what does that exactly look like? And what makes you different than the other 14 candidates that are in this race? And as you said, we had 7 on stage last night, but they were all trying to capture the attention of not just voters, but viewers and people around the state.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned all of those Democrats trying to separate themselves. We have some more progressive Democrats, a little bit more moderate Democrats, and this being hosted there in the Bayview Opera House in San Francisco. You can imagine what the demographic of that looked like, but they're trying to speak to largely Californians as a whole. How many of them did try to distance themselves from Gavin Newsom, if at all?
Yeah, I think they all did. I mean, obviously, we don't want to forget about Steve Hilton, the Republican that was on stage, that, and by and large, stuck to his message that he believes that the state is in the situation and faces the challenges it does because of the Democrat rule, he says, for the last 16 years. So that was sort of Steve's messaging and blaming Democrats and saying it's time for a change, specifically with the party of the chief CEO of the state, the governor. And for the other Democrats, they were sort of looking for a different line of continuing some of the work that Gavin Newsom has done, but suggesting in other areas that accountability, certainly when it comes to spending, as the state faces an $18 billion deficit in the new fiscal year, and looking at other ways to differentiate themselves, not just from themselves, but like you said, from Governor Gavin Newsom and kind of where things have been the last 8 years.
And I found it really interesting. You mentioned the one Republican, the lone Republican on the stage last night, that being Steve Hilton. And he didn't really so much attack the other Democrats. Well, he did, but he also really went after Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, who had a scheduling conflict and did not have the chance to be there. He said he should drop out of the race. Is this Steve Hilton hoping to get on the ballot come November and have it a Dem versus a Republican versus a Dem versus a Dem?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly strategic by Steve Hilton. This was the first question out the gate. They gave opening statements, and the first question on immigration went to Steve Hilton, and he came right out with this prepared answer about attacking Chad Bianco, the sheriff of Riverside County, who has been leading in the polls, and obviously strategic because Republicans at this point are sort of splitting their vote between the two, Hilton and Bianco. And so if he can consolidate the votes, Hilton thinks, of Republicans, perhaps he thinks he can move past this June primary into that top talked to. A reminder that the way California does its primaries is it doesn't matter your party. The top 2 vote getters, regardless of party, move on to that head-to-head matchup in November. And this is another problem Democrats are facing as well, is that they are all splitting the vote across the board. So you don't see too many folks polling even in double digits. You've got Katie Porter, Eric Swalwell at the top, and we'll be interested to see what a new poll looks like with the San Jose mayor, Matt Mahan, who's jumped into this race and gained some notoriety and gained some fundraising. But they're all splitting the votes across the board. So certainly strategic on Steve Hilton's part to try and pull more of the Republican vote by immediately attacking Chad Bianco. We have not heard from Bianco's campaign yet because he certainly wasn't on stage to defend himself against those attacks from Hilton, but certainly that was measured and planned.
And you mentioned 2 names that were not in the room last night. Those 2 members of Congress, Eric Swalwell and also Katie Porter, there representing California. Did they miss out on an opportunity to speak to voters in California? Will there be other opportunities down the road for them?
Look, I'm certainly biased in this, Andy, because we hosted this debate that we would have liked to hear from as many candidate voices as possible. And certainly Katie Porter has been polling near the top, the former Orange County Congresswoman, and Eric Swalwell. Swalwell had to be, as I know you've been covering, there in D.C. for those congressional votes on the budget. And so he said he regretted that he couldn't come because he was initially part of our plan. But yeah, you know, I think moving forward, now that this debate sort of broke through and caught the attention of some California voters, moving forward the next 4 months, it is incumbent upon all these candidates to get out there and get their messages out to voters because they want to get through that primary. And so we very well could see perhaps Democrats, the Democratic Party, later this month. They're meeting in San Francisco. And you have to wonder if they will endorse a candidate in this very crowded race, or if they'll look to consolidate their support behind one of these candidates, because there is this sort of outside chance and probability based on the way they're splitting the vote that you could very well see one, if not both of these Republicans move forward, again, based on how these Democrats are splitting the ticket.
Yeah, that is so very true. And of course, the KTVU poll, as well as our poll here on Live Now, really had Steve Hilton leading the charge. People were impressed by some of his views, and that may be because the Democrats splitting the ticket so much. But was that your view? Was Steve Hilton as impressive as the viewers saw last night?
Sorry, Andy, can you repeat that?
I was going to ask you about kind of the viewers, because we had a KTVU poll kind of saying Steve Hilton was really leading the charge. Our Live Now poll as well, a similar kind of sentiment as well. And that could be because the Dems were kind of splitting a little bit of their favor over the viewers. But did you get the sentiment that Steve Hilton impressed some people last night?
Yeah, I think certainly the things that he said were grabbing the attention of folks, right? And certainly we were happy to see how many people were engaged in some of that live polling that we were doing. And like any polling, there's no exact science to this, but certainly he was polling a lot of that vote from people that were watching. And certainly we're not clear on what the demographics statewide across the board and on the Fox local app are watching this debate. But yeah, he was leading in a lot of those polls, and perhaps that was because he was differentiating themselves. Andy, I have a rule that I never call a winner of a debate. This may sound hokey, but I think ultimately California voters were the ones who won last night because they got to hear a lot of policy differences. As you mentioned in the beginning of this, we didn't see too much conflict. We saw a couple of spats between Steyer and Mahan, and then Hilton and Mahan. But ultimately, these candidates stuck to their time. They were able to get their messages out there. And I think voters were able really to hear differences, albeit slight differences, in policy issues, because these candidates were actually given the time to speak specifically about the plans that they have if they were elected.
Yeah, that is so very true. And obviously these debates are always so subjective based on your views, based on your background, so many different factors going into this as well. So I just wanted to get your take on that. My last question before I let you go, because a lot can change between now and June, and obviously a lot can change between now and November. But Tom Steyer, obviously the billionaire, sidestep questions about potentially taxes on the wealth. And obviously we had some kind of confrontation, a little bit more spicy. How did he handle some of those? Because he is by far outraising some of these individuals, outspending other candidates so far.
Yeah, and this is what we expect from Tom Steyer, right? He's going to spend a lot of his own money. He's been very candid. In fact, the day before the debate, he released a new ad and a new plan that says he supports a wealth tax on billionaires. And that is, we should mention, separate from the process that is trying to make its way through the ballot in California, a billionaire's tax. He says, that's not necessarily the plan I want. I'm presenting my own plan to, go after billionaires and make them pay more in their taxes. That has often been his message, talking about how he's signed this pledge to give away much of his wealth that he has earned in his career. And it was interesting to see him continue to share that message. And, Marla Teja, as one of my co-moderators, even said last night that she felt like a lot of his answers, it was like watching many of those commercials that we have seen widespread, because he's spending so much of that money and outspending other candidates when it comes particularly to TV ads and commercials on digital as well, but is very much in line with the comments that he's been making so far.
Yeah, some of those advertisements can only go so far. Obviously, the candidate itself will speak to the voters. Greg, before I let you go, I have to ask, because it's just coming across social media about Kamala Harris teasing out potentially a new announcement of any kind. Are you on social media right now kind of grasping this? And any thoughts initially? I know this is potentially catching you off guard.
Yeah, no, listen, we certainly were following this Vice President Kamala Harris watch for a long time, right? And then she came out with that announcement a few months ago that said she wouldn't be running for California governor, and many were focused on what the next stage of her career would look like. And so I think part of why we're seeing such a crowded field is that crowd was ready to stay back if Harris did enter this race for California governor. And when she announced that she wouldn't, that's when we saw all of these people jump into this race, which made it really wide open. I am interested to see, I had not seen that message that she had put out, but interested to see what she does say and what that announcement looks like on her political career, as I know a lot of the country is waiting to see what that looks like from the former vice president.
Yeah, a tease that everyone is kind of looking at, and obviously talking about that spice that this governor race might need, and this could be a major infusion of that if that is the case. We'll see what happens. Greg Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You're on Live Now.
Thanks, Andy. Take care of yourself.
All right, thanks so much. All right, great conversation as always. And of course, that's just coming in right here, live, raw, and unfiltered as we do it, as Kamala Harris HQ putting out this post on social media, teasing some sort of announcement. Not exactly sure exactly what it entails, but I want to play it one more time for you here of what we're seeing. And this was just the silent tweet, but you can see there signing into this account and some of the passwords talking about Project 2025, alluding to now President Donald Trump, saying headquarters Kamala HQ. So teasing an announcement come tomorrow. We'll potentially try to dive into what exactly that means, what the now former vice president has on her mind. Obviously, kind of staying out of the public view for the last better part of a year since that loss to Donald Trump in the election. So again, we're following closely here on Live Now from Fox. The first tweet since Election Day post on social media. We'll have that and much more here on Live Now from Fox after this.